Oh yeah, it's time for Beer Dice and Sick Minis, the podcast about casual miniature wargaming, because that's awesome. And tonight's show, we have a lot of stuff we're going to talk about, and I am joined by my erstwhile co-host, Ken Sawyer.
Hello!
And Jeremy Wilkson.
Hey there.
And Nate will be joining us shortly, hopefully, or not, whatever. Our big main thing is that we like to bring you a little bit of coverage on all kinds of miniature war games from all over the place. Talk about our own games and playing within our own hobby groups. And kind of just yap about shit that you might want to hear about. In kind of an irreverent and comedic way, as much as possible. And drink beer. Anyway.
Yay, beer.
Yeah, today we're going to have a little bit about Malifaux. Ken has thrown me down the rabbit hole of Flames of War, which caused me to jump into Team Yankee because I'm not a big historical guy. I like the modern or sci-fi stuff. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And in the interim since last show, I got in a couple games of Malifaux with Jeremy, and a game of Aeronautica Imperialis with Rebecca, and a game of Flames of War with Ken.
Yes.
So,
And an Aeronautica with me.
Yeah. And you played Aeronautica too. I talked you into it.
You did.
And what'd you think?
I can admit that I can't admit that I'm wrong.
Good. I'm glad that you can't admit that you can't admit that
No, I had a lot of fun with the game. It was I enjoyed it much more than I thought I was going to.
Well, that's good. It is a fun game. Yeah, other than that, I think we might move on to some of the new release stuff that we know is coming out. I know GW released, let's see, since the last my notes were done. I know they did, what was it, the Beastgrave?
The Beastgrave, yeah.
And that actually came out since then.
Yep. It actually made me pick up other Age of Sigmar stuff.
I mean, nothing wrong with that.
I was like, they're really releasing a lot of stuff that's cool, but I like the wood dudes.
Yeah, I unfortunately have not been able to play Age of Sigmar, and have always had an interest in it, and have an entire Daughters of Cain army that is boxed up downstairs.
Oh, okay.
In the Room of Shame.
Yes, I saw the Room of Shame just a moment ago.
Yeah, it is shameful.
Yeah, I actually am in a position probably to field a pretty big, substantial Spirits of the Wood army, so.
Spirits of the Wood?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's...
So many jokes.
Sounds like a special kind of DVD you can buy. Mm-hmm. No, Billy, those two men just really love each other. That's...
Go down to your old video store, go past the beaded curtain.
Yeah, and pick up Spirit of the Wood.
Spirit of the Wood.
Yep, that's how that works. And anyway, so along with all that nonsense, they did announce and open up pre-orders for the Bandai action figure Space Marine.
Yeah, I saw a lot of noise about that. I really did. It was interesting.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I think it's like 8 or 10 inches tall, and it's fabulously studio painted and done to Bandai's high hobby standard. And it was $100 US, and they only made 9,000 of them.
And they're probably all gone now.
I think so, because I just checked their site, and there's nothing that says available to pre-order under the 40K heading. And so I definitely pre-ordered one. So I'll get it next year.
One more pretty for the case.
Yeah, it'll sit on my station and stare at people while I'm tattooing them.
There you go.
Oh, Malifaux new releases. They had a bunch that just recently came out. And restocks along with 3rd edition stuff. So if your FLGS carries Malifaux, you can head down there and they've got some new stuff for you. And I can't remember everything that came out. It was a lot of stuff. It was like the entire next wave and restocks of the previous wave finally started showing up. And it was good. it was happiness.
Now, the books had already all come out. They were just finally getting more of them out, correct? Or was that part of the new release?
No, the faction
it's
books
part-
are still coming
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because right now I'm not sure. I know they just released the Guild, the Neverborn, and
One
Bayou.
more. Yeah, Bayou, I
Yeah.
think is the other one. And I
And-
just saw the Bayou box in that local store that we were in. So
yep. Yeah, I think they had some or whatever. I think they had one box.
One
I know
box.
I know when I was there last, they had a box of Burning Bridges, which is
Oh,
Karis.
right, yeah, Karis.
That's
So-
Arcanist. But yeah, that's the main thing. A little pretty quiet on the new release front. And Jeremy recently did a Malifaux tournament.
Yeah.
Speaking of Malifaux.
Yeah, I had a really good time with that. Took a whole bunch of whoopings on that. I think I came in like 14th or something like that in the tournament. But
I mean, it wasn't dead last.
no, it wasn't. It was the first time I had done a miniatures tournament like that, especially Malifaux, and it was a great learning experience. I figured out a lot about the flow of the tournament, and the limitations of time are a major factor. One of the first game I played in, the loss of time was my fault. I was picking things up, and I played way too slowly and didn't have enough time to come back. And then I had time, ran out of time on the second game as well. And a lot of how I was playing my list was that turn 4 and 5 is when it comes back and really starts to hammer at you, because it's a very smashy list, not scheming run list.
Right.
And so, when I would lose, it'd be like a 2-1, 2-0, but because I never really got my opportunity to start getting those schemes after I had decimated their list. And one of my last ones, and just kind of changed up things on how I was playing it. But it was a lot of fun. Was it Matt from that was representing Malifaux down there?
Matt Riddle, the
Matt Riddle.
henchman.
He was great. Got to play him and a great group of guys down there, and it was a whole lot of fun. Lots of people came out.
Yeah, one of the cool things is I really love the fact that one of the players actually, messaged the TO on there and literally said, hey, I've taught my kids that are kind of younger how to play Malifaux. Would y'all be cool with me bringing them to the tournament and playing? And would you guys be okay playing against them and stuff like that? They're actually decently good, and it'll be, a normal Malifaux play experience. And they were like, look, we'd love to have him regardless.
And on that note,
Which was really
I
cool.
forget his name, but I did actually, I know exactly who you're talking about
Yeah.
when I was there, and he was awesome, and his kids were great.
Yeah, and
They were great kids.
Yeah, and it's those kind of things that really make, in my opinion, a community and show the willingness to build a community, because, it's very rare that, some people do get into stuff later on in life or whatever, but a lot of times you have some experience with touching it as a child, and bringing it into your life, or having it brought into your life, or seeing it, things like that. I know that I got into 40K because I played Rogue Trader when I was a kid, and we played with Lego men because we couldn't afford the models,
Right.
and did whatever. But it was like, had I not had that experience later on, I would not have gotten back into it when I was like, okay, I'm working third shift and I need something to do because I have like 6 hours of boredom on my shift.
Right.
And then that was when I walked into Ken's GW store
Right.
back in the day.
Yep.
I was like, ooh, what are these Tau? I didn't know about these guys.
But that's the thing, is when you go to a tournament and that the culture of hobby is being used and talked about, and like you said, you're building community and stuff like that, it really starts to make the experience that much better for everybody
absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, so long and short of the story is that children do not belong in a box. They should be playing games with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along with those kind of things, it brings into one of the things that I am big on when playing casual and even tournament games is the general headline segment of how not to be a douche.
Right.
And a lot of people need to hear this. Because you're playing, a lot of times I play to my opponent. If I'm playing somebody who's not incredibly familiar with the game, or, isn't a long-time player themselves, or whatever, even if it's in a tournament setting, I'm still like, okay, and I'm not just going to raffle stomp them into the next century. I'm going to actually be like, okay, cool, here's what things in my list do. Here's what you can expect. I'm going to play, I may, kind of purposefully, be like, okay, well, I've just about wasted that unit. I can do this thing to give me more attacks and do more damage to it. But I'm not going to, because I've already pretty much reduced the effectiveness of this to 0. So I'm not just going to roll right over this guy, because I want him to be able to hit me back. And I'm going to lose a few models, but I know the next turn, he's going to hit me, I'm going to hit him back, and then he's going to be done.
Right.
But I want to give him a chance to roll some dice and not just roll right over him. And then at the same time, if I am playing somebody who's like, oh, I have a lot of experience and I'm, tournament savvy and I've been doing this, then yeah, I'm going to
Strike hard, strike first, no mercy, sir.
Yeah.
Sweep the leg.
Sweep the leg, Johnny.
I'm going to put all like 2 inches of my penis on that table and just be like, so what?
Yeah.
What you got?
Right. But we all have people that we prefer to play, and typically those relationships can last a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually people that are like, hey, let's just have a fun time rolling dice.
Mm-hmm.
That aren't so worried about the absolute outcome and who won and who lost, even though there's competitive people in the world. Just hanging out with your friends and kind of having a good time, playing the game. Getting into the scenario and like rooting for each other and stuff.
Yeah. And if you're like me and I can be somewhat competitive, learn to enjoy winning. If you're into it and you're emotionally invested in, there's going to be those moments that get to you and you huff and you're like, but you got to learn to also, like, if you're getting waffle stomped or just being beaten by a better opponent, learn to enjoy it, learn to learn from it, have fun with it.
You meant learn to enjoy losing.
Yeah.
You said winning. I'm like,
sorry, yeah.
It's easy to enjoy winning.
What I meant to say was learn to enjoy losing.
When I win, I like to jump up on the table, rotate my hips at somebody, and scream, "Suck it, bitch!" No, actually, I don't. Unless I'm playing Jeremy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's the nature of the thing. It is a casual thing, and miniature wargaming is one of the few games or game styles you'll ever find that it's like, so what if you didn't use a rule?
Yeah.
So what if you fudge that? Oops. Whoop-de-doo. Let's just keep going.
Right.
Yeah.
Who cares? And I enjoy it for that thing because it's really more about, and that's what the podcast too is, about, is having a beer, chilling with your homies, playing some stupid games.
That's right.
Yep.
And even within this group, and what we are hoping that anybody listening to this is, like we were saying, is that we're always pushing each other to like do the hobby part. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's play the games, have a good time, do the hobby part, buy the next unit, make sure that you're building out lists and that you're actually playing games. So many people play Theory Hammer, and that's not as fun as actually doing it.
Well, you talked about something in the last one that got me excited to try, and I went and got me some drywall mud.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to make some cobblestone streets for some of my Malifaux lists.
Yeah, awesome. Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I mean, that's the thing, is inspiring people to like do the next thing with a hobby. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, because it's really more so about the hobby. Because if you really look at it, I mean, especially as adults, we get a little bit of time to game here and there. I mean, between last podcast and this one, it's been 3 weeks now, and I played 2 games of Malifaux with you, Jeremy,
and an Aeronautica with me.
I played an Aeronautica with you and Rebecca, and I played a Flames of War with Ken. So I played 5 games in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty game-intensive schedule, even for most people who don't work, a billion hours like I do. And, but, I spend a couple hours a day or more doing the hobby stuff.
And just so everybody knows, when he said billion, he did put his pinky in the corner of his mouth.
Yes. Billion. Because that's the fun times.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. Is the whole idea of the premise, I guess, that you're going to get together with friends and play some games. We know so many people get to a certain spot in their life and then they're like, I don't have any hobbies and I don't have any friends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can go down to your
Yeah.
local family, friendly local game store, the nerd haven that it is, and you can pick up, a box of whatever game
Yeah.
looks coolest to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you're lonely with no friends, I mean, literally $50 to $100 and a smile and a good attitude, walk into a game store, you can start
Yeah.
making friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to worry. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm socially awkward. Well, so are they.
Right. So am I. I mean, no.
There's a reason we're on radio and not talking to you in person.
Yeah. It's mostly because of my deformities. I look like a man from the waist up. But anyway, it happens. Don't knock it till you tried it. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, no matter what tournament you're at, no matter what you're doing, and it's like, if you are winning, if you are just landsliding the shit and bamboozling the fuck out of your opponent, then it's like, hey, bro, kind of sorry. I mean, I've done that. I've been like, shit, I feel bad. I'm kicking your ass.
Yeah, and I've caught myself in tournament play before in the past, and it's embarrassing, really, to even think about it. But I've gotten angry at a game, and I'm like, man, if I get angry at a game again, I have done this wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are a couple times I've gotten angry at Malifaux, and that's Jeremy's fault.
Well,
Thanks, Jeremy.
You'll like this too. Is speaking of Matt, when I was playing against him, it was like the only possible card was the Red Joker that could have killed my Teddy, and sure enough, damage flip, Red Joker. And it was just like in one turn, one of his models, a much weaker model, just tables one of my big models off the table. And he was like, man, I feel bad. I was like, you shouldn't. I mean, what are the odds? You get that one card, and that's what happened. But he kept saying, he's like, I feel bad. It's like, you shouldn't feel bad.
Right.
Yeah, in Malifaux, I've learned to literally try to never say, so long as I don't flip the Black Joker. Because that means
Self-fulfilling prophecy for you? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, man, last time Jeremy and I played, we were playing Lady Justice versus, was it your Mayfang? Or what is it? Misaki?
My Last Blossom.
Yeah, Last Blossom. Was that Misaki?
Yeah.
Yeah, playing Misaki versus Lady J. And I'm like, man, I got this in the bag. I just need to not flip a Black Joker right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. I flip the damage flip, and I'm like, I got a damage, and I'm about to kill Misaki. Last attack, and I pull it out, and I'm like, and it don't fucking happen.
And then from there on, it turned real bad for him. I mean, Misaki should have been dead, and I was able to use her, and I took his leader off the board with her.
Yeah.
And because the game was really leaning his way. Not one, it could be argued one way or the other, I guess, but I mean, it was definitely looking like I was not going to do so well. And then that Black Joker flipped, and then he didn't remove Misaki, and it was bad from there.
I made a gamble on taking out his master, and I'm like, yeah, I got this, because I'm like, it doesn't matter, I can flip min damage, and I got Misaki, and I flip, and it's Black Joker, which is 0 damage, and I'm like, motherfucker. And I literally just tossed the card, and was like, and I do nothing, and I tossed the card, and then I look at Jeremy, and I just start laughing, because I'm like, how comical is it that, that's out of my entire deck of 5 billion cards, the one time in the game when I don't want that card, I get it.
Yeah.
It's like the die rolls. That's why, in 40K, I would almost... people would be like, you can spend command points to re-roll that one. I'm like, nope.
No.
They're like, why not? I'm like, because if I spend command points to re-roll a 1, it's going to be a 1.
Yeah.
Now, if I need a 4-up and I roll a 3 or a 2 and I spend a command point, I'm likely to get it. But if I roll a 1 and spend a command point, I'm going to roll another 1.
I'm going to roll another one.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Well, I think where it gets you against me a lot of the times is you like to take risks, and I tend to play conservatively. And a lot of times, I think the conservative player will come out on top over reckless players.
It depends. I think that the way a lot of these games are structured is to basically make it so that you have to know what you're doing to play reckless. And usually when I played reckless or aggressively and it's bit me in the ass is when I'm like, I'm going to try out this Nekema crew against your Dreamer crew. We're going to see how this goes. And then I play it incredibly aggressively and I'm like, oh wow, Nekema's dead turn 1. Fucking table. Why did I do that? You know? And I mean, and it's like, and then it's funny. I always feel bad because I'm like, God darn! I'm visibly kind of irritated or upset just because of the situation of the game. And Jeremy's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. We could reset, do that over again. It's like, we could go a turn or two." But I'm like, "Nah, dude. That's how it is. That's how I learn. Like, don't worry about it. I just get that way. I'm not like mad at you or anything. I'm mad at Nekema."
Well, it's interesting though that you bring that up because some games tend to have more flexibility where if you like to play a certain way, there's armies for you for that. You know, if you like to play conservative, you can play very conservative, and if you like to play strategic, you know, there's more strategic. And some games are more bent that way where you can really kind of figure out the play style that makes sense for you. And then it's just making sure you really know your play style so that you can deal with the yin and the yang and the opposites of what you are out there. Some game systems, you know, they don't really give you that kind of like everything's homogenized a little bit more.
Yeah, I've noticed that like Malifaux is really cool because each faction has a master that does similar things. Like you may have a control master in each faction, but each one does it a little differently to keep things fresh and different. And so you could argue that, you know, the control master in Bayou is, you know, better than the control master in whatever, but it really depends on your play style.
It does.
And it's summed up in a you know thing that a lot of people say about Malifaux 3rd edition is that they say every master or every crew is broken. And in a way that's true.
They can't all be broken.
Well, in a way it's true because if the matchup of strategies, schemes, play styles, and all that, then, you know, or if it's something you've never really dealt with, it's going to run right over you. Or you're going to run right over your opponent or whatever just because it's like, you know, that's the way it is. This is really strong, really powerful. But as I found out, you know, it's like, okay, I'm playing this crew, like, play Terra crew. I can't quite seem to grasp how to make the timing and the conditions and everything work to make a Terra crew work quite right. I mean, I've only played it a few times, and that's one of the reasons why, because you have to practice some of these crews. And so I haven't quite got it clicked on as to how to make this work. So, of course, if I play Terra against your Dreamer crew, I'm going to feel like Dreamer's the most OP shit in the entire world. But then when I play Leviticus or Lady J against your Dreamer crew,
it doesn't seem so bad, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm doing stuff. I'm able to do things. You're not just running right over me.
And Malifaux opens up as a game when you get enough plastic to have options on your crew build, what crews you're able to bring. Like at the tournament we were at, you had to pick a faction. So you couldn't just bring your whole collection, but you still had a whole faction to choose from. So if you had an entire faction, you got a lot to choose from there between all the masters, all the models, and
based on what master they picked
one
out,
of the
you can be like
big lessons I learned on one of my games, and they even did some changing to the table after my game in it. There was so much terrain on that table. I had a really hard time even moving a lot of my models around. I had a lot of big base models. And so, I mean, I literally had to go all the way around the side. I had to go around the sides. I couldn't move them up the middle like I wanted to because they just couldn't fit through the terrain. And having like, you know, and then later on I got another game where it was the exact opposite was the case because I was going up against a very like shooty gunline crew on a very open map with my Malifaux army. Or sorry, my Neverborn army. And even though I won that one, like that first turn and a half was pretty ugly. Because I was just having to let my guys be exposed. There was no way around. I was playing my big, lumbering Neverborn army, like marching them forward. I took a lot of hits for that. And that's something I hadn't really experienced. I'm always like, I already know what I'm going to play. He already knows what he's going to play. We show up, we set up some terrain, and we play. But when now I'm going against different people and different crews with different terrains every time, not just thinking about what you're playing against, but actually looking at the table. As I, looking back on a couple of those games, and I had models I could have switched out, but I was still kind of learning the whole idea of the tournament scene and how that was all going. I definitely was like, I should have swapped these models out for these models, not because of my opponent, but because of the terrain. The way the map was set up, these models would have been really good for it, being able to be more maneuverable, or rather than having a handful of big, let me go ahead and spread out more against this gun line where I can get more done and not just getting shot off the table.
Well, it kind of brings up another question, I guess, that goes along with this is, do you as players think that you pick armies for aesthetics or play styles when you go in? Like right now, if you had to pick a new army to start in Malifaux, would you go for aesthetics or would you go for play
I'd go
style?
both. When I picked Neverborn, it was completely aesthetics. I knew nothing about the game. I just thought they sounded cool. I liked the horror show of the models. But then when I was thinking about what faction do I want to get into next, the 10 Thunders, I went because of the playstyle. And it wasn't so much I was looking for an OP faction. I just was looking for something that played very differently than what I already had. So I wanted to try some new mechanics.
And when you opened up the Dreamer box and it said, Step 1, you are a cheater at this point, that didn't clue you in?
Oh no, I knew I had chosen wisely.
How about you? Do you pick on aesthetics or gameplay more?
I actually picked pretty much directly on rule of cool. Most of if I'm getting into a game, the first thing I do is what army speaks to me the most. What army do I like the look of the units, or whatever about them. And I've had a few games where I've done that and been like, this army looks the coolest, and then I play them and they're garbage, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to start thinking one of the other armies in this game is cool because this thing sucks. But I find that most games, modern games nowadays, most of the stuff is balanced enough so that instead of me going, okay, well, I need to completely redesign or go for a totally different army, I may go, okay, I need to think differently about my list. I need to research these rules more to figure out a different play style or a way to look at it. I look more at, if I'm losing heavily in a game, that the problem's me.
Right.
And go from there, unless I'm playing Grey Knights.
I don't know my army very well, is what I always think, personally. It's like, I just need to play this more. I tend to think that with me, I think it depends on what game system it is. I tend to want to play fewer models, more precise armies. But, I mean, Privateer Press, I played Trolls, which is not that. I mean, it is, but it's not. Well, I guess it just depends on the game system, almost, to me.
Here's a summary of exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So, getting back into War Machine.
Right.
I really looked at the factions that War Machine has to offer, and I mean, back in the day, I was a Signar player.
Right.
And I really loved Signar. I liked the aesthetic they had. They were very clean. They were very kind of more futuristic-y versus just pure steampunk. And I went, this is cool. Well, when I looked at stuff recently, I went, man, these Infernals look amazing. And I'm normally not big on the bad guys or the evil stuff. You know that.
I don't really typically you're not.
Yeah, I don't really play Chaos and 40K or anything. And then so I looked at their aesthetic, and I went, these guys are really cool. And then I kind of looked at what they're about, and I'm like, okay, well, this is more like the Sith from Jedi, which I can get into because it's not so much that they're evil, it's just they're from a different plane of existence and happen to, want to harvest the souls of every living thing, and it's just a difference in philosophy, really. And so I was like, okay, so I can get into the faction as they are, and then I started looking, at the play style, and I started asking John a bunch of questions about the play style, because I know he's got a lot of experience with War Machine and playing tournaments and playing at Meeple Madness and stuff like that with a lot of people. And, he was like, well, I only know so much about the Infernals, and I know some of their rules are a little weird, and you got to do this and do that, and it's a little goofy. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do goofy getting into things. And so then I went back to the drawing board and I looked through factions and I looked through things and kind of did some more research. And, I didn't look up a lot of rules stuff, but I just kind of was like, okay. And every time I was drawn back to the Infernals.
Oh, okay.
And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to have to play these guys and just deal with whatever goofiness is in their rules. So then I ordered them, and then I started looking things up. I got the War Room app and started looking at the cards and learning and like kind of looking up some tactics websites about how you're supposed to play them. And the goofiness is something I can totally deal with.
Okay.
And where I'm like, okay, cool. I think I'm actually going to have fun with this because they're an army that's actually kind of a mixture of the War Machine, focus aspect with a decent mix of the Horde's risk with the rage aspect.
Correct.
Where they kind of, the way Essence works for that army, which is their token system, is kind of a mix of both. And I'm like, this is really cool because focus always felt kind of flat. And as Jeremy mentioned, I'm kind of an aggressive, gambly player, and when I played Hordes in the past, I never did really good with managing my rage very well. And there were many, many Hordes games where my War Beast turned on my own army because bad rage.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in that game, it's definitely like resource management versus, just all out.
Yeah, it's described as resource versus risk.
Risk, yeah. I mean, it's. I don't see it so much as risk as just like you said, is like a little bit more of an aggressive play style where you're willing to
run out
just
there,
push it and things like that. Have you ever? Here's another question: have you ever, either one of you, decided not to play an army because of the backstory or the fluff around it or something like that? I know some people are really tied up into that. I tend not to be because I'll go find the faction that nobody wants to play and make sure that somebody's playing it. And I guess that might have come from me being at the store and owning the store. Like, it didn't bother me to pick up the army that nobody would do, right? But I don't know that I've ever said, oh, I can't play this army because of the backstory.
I can't. Yeah.
I have.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember. Honestly, I think it was Khador. Was War Machine Khador.
Okay. Yeah.
And I like Khador, the kind of Russian aesthetic, big bulky.
Right.
Everything's red, yay. Khador I really wanted to play, but I kind of read some of their backstory and I'm like, I just can't get into this.
Right.
And I'm like, and then I bought a few of the models and I played them and I had fun with them, but I was like, being more of a narrative kind of guy, I want to have a cool narrative. And I think that's also why I don't really play orcs in 40K.
Right.
Because I like a lot of the stuff about the orcs, but to me they're kind of this mindless, idiotic horde, and I just kind of don't get into that of the way they are, the personality, I guess, of the army.
And the thing is, I kind of felt the same way about orcs in 40K. It just didn't grab me. But then we got into the other side, and immediately I was like, gibbering horde. I think these guys are awesome, and it's the same thing. It's a big, almost mindless horde.
Right.
Of these creatures, and I was like, but I really like this mindless horde, not so much about that one.
Right. And it's like, I got into Abyssinia because I liked the aesthetic of the models, and I really liked their backstory, and I really liked everything about that, but then I started playing them, and the play style was not really what I wanted. And so then I switched over to King's Empire, which were the Brits, which I was like, Brits, it's been done before. And I wasn't that fired up about them. I did like the way they looked because I liked that World War I, World War II steampunk aesthetic.
Right.
And so I like the look of them, other than I think the Motor Scout is a bit stupid. But, regardless, I like the look of that army, but it was kind of second or even third tier because I like the look of the Gibbering Horde and the Cult of the Burning Man too. And, but in playing them, I love their play style.
Okay.
I mean, love the hell out of that. Plus, for some reason, I'm really good at the penetrating flip and tend to wipe entire units.
Yeah,
Right.
I remember that. Yeah, that was ugly. But yeah, one thing I was talking to I think it was Matt again, and about the other side, and I was like, yeah, I want to get back into it, and play my Gibbering Horde army so much, and he laughed about that. Apparently, there's a lot of people who really like the Gibbering Horde.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of it too is one, it is fun to play, and I do like the crew mechanic, as it were. But more than that, their mechanics just really thematically fit them very well. Like everything they do isn't just a mechanic. You can see it in your head. It makes sense.
I will say that that is probably one of the reasons I like Weird as a games company as much as I do, because between Malifaux and the other side, I have noticed that they are incredibly good at making rules that make things very thematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, I like 40K and I like GW, and they have very fluffy stuff.
Right.
But then when you look at their rules, it's almost like I read the rules for the different armies, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, it's another +1 to wound, or it's another advanced plus, or this plus, or that plus. And it's like, okay, I can see how that fits the theme, but it's like they're grabbing from a bucket of like 20 different rules to create these themes for these armies,
right?
And not like thinking out of the box, or they've tried to pigeonhole themselves
into a rule system.
Yeah, and I don't want to come off like bashing GW and Warhammer, because I mean, I'm probably the one who likes it the least at the table.
Right.
But they're great models. It is a good game, but my biggest complaint is there's too many times when I'm playing it where I really just feel like we're throwing dice at each other.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there isn't strategy, that there isn't gameplay, and there isn't depth, but there's just lots of time where I feel that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And Nathan is here. So, if we want, we can take a quick little break, and that way we can break for a minute, and then I can get his mic checked in, and then we'll come back with Nate on microphone.
Yay!
As well, and continue our discussion about armies and such. Yeah. And we're back from our stupid break. Who needs breaks? Breaks are dumb. Anyway, as I said, Nate just arrived.
I heard that there was heresy, and I got here as fast as I could.
Yeah, and you're not stopping a bit of it.
Well, let's dive right in.
Yeah, if by heresy you mean we're talking about pretty much every game other than Games Workshop stuff.
Well, by their definition, that is quite heretical.
Yeah. So, we've been talking a little bit about Malifaux and Jeremy's experiences at Gigabyte's Malifaux tournament, and how that went for him, and playing, and how not to be a douche at tournaments.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah. And then I think we pretty much kind of covered it, and we kind of, morphed onto other stuff. So let's move on to, because like I said, we played, Ken and I played Flames of War.
How'd that go?
We just kind of played a game with I guess it's the Hit the Beach box.
Yes.
And,
which, if you're Hispanic, that's all about domestic violence.
Isn't everything?
No. That's stereotypical and racist. We don't do that.
We don't?
But the Hit the Beach box was pretty good. We had a good time with the game. I've been not playing 4th edition, so it was new for me. But it's also pushed me to do, Team Yankee, because you like that a little bit better than the historical part. So
well, I liked both, and I like the mechanic of the game, and seeing that Team Yankee was relatively the same.
Yeah, it is.
It just different stats and more modern models.
Right.
I was like, wow, I've had a weird fascination with M1 Abrams tanks since I was a child. So now I can run a bunch of them around on a battlefield. So why would I not want to do that?
It's because you saw them on CNN, right?
No. I saw them on like a PBS documentary when they were announcing them.
You had to think way back for that one too.
Yeah, I did. It took a second. Those chipmunks had to run really fast.
It's interesting. A lot of the guys that I've talked to that like Team Yankee either played in those vehicles while they were doing a stint for the U.S. government, or or they saw it on TV. So that's
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
And I find that I really enjoyed the mechanic, and I've always had a fascination with, what I call the epic scale games, just because my
Right.
intro was Epic Space Marine, and anything that's in that 15, 10, or 8 mm scale range, I've always really liked it because you can play on the same table area, but you can field a shit ton of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did. We filled a pretty big army. And I enjoyed the game. We're going to keep goofing around with it for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting because just in the mechanics of the game, it is a you go with everything, I go with everything, but you're doing things while your opponent's doing things as well in a more defensive posture, and you're paying more attention to what's going on with them during their turn because one of the things I really enjoyed was terrain and how you move your troops on the terrain and how you do those things really matters.
Yeah.
And like one of Ken's tanks got bogged down,
Right.
and it gave me an advantage.
It did.
Just because Ken can't roll a dice worth of shit.
And he stayed stuck there for most of the game, if I remember right.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think you finally got him out, but by that point,
They were out with shovels and picks and stuff going, hey.
Yeah, by that point, I'd already surrounded the objective and been picking stuff off, and it was
Right.
it was really cool, and I like the way that they do the shooting, with you kind of everything, whatever your unit is hit on whatever. And I was looking at the cards, and I'm like, okay, my Shermans are aggressive, so they're easier to hit because the Sherman tank drivers or whatever, I guess, just weren't trained, to hold down or hide in terrain or anything. They were just silly Americans. They just come rushing right in.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's cool. And then even though I'm hit easier, it was mitigated by the armor of the tank and the firepower of your enemy's weapons. And I was like, well, that's really cool that even if he hits me and even if he does essentially some damage, there's a good chance that I'm just going to bail out and be kind of useless for a turn instead of, oh, you hit me, I failed my armor save, I'm dead.
I'm out. Yeah.
I'm gone.
The other thing is, it was that moment of realization where you were like, I have how many machine guns?
Right. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm rolling a lot of dice
I'm
here.
rolling a lot of dice.
And it was cool to see how it worked and how everything went and how the interactions worked on a because I'm always a big fan of alternating activations where I activate a unit, you activate a unit, I activate a unit, you activate a unit, and seeing it where it was I'm going to go with everything and you're going to go with everything, and seeing that there could be interactivity between the opponents in that format was really cool. And it got me stoked for the game, and I'm really looking forward to playing, some more Flames of War and Team Yankee.
Right. I just got to talk him in the mid-war. If I could only talk him in the mid-war.
You've already talked me into mid-war. I have most of that list and even bought
absolutely.
stuff for it.
Yeah.
I just have to finish putting everything together because it's a lot more models than a Team Yankee.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot more models. And it's going to take time to build that army out. But yeah, I enjoy Flames of War because there's mission, there's objective, and you've got this opportunity to kind of... The objectives in that game are going to be up in the air until somebody really makes that decisive move that blocks it off. It's interesting. Way more interesting than... I feel like some games throw the missions and objectives in there just to go, oh yeah, we have missions and objectives. For Battlefront games, it's really more key to the game.
Right, and I also enjoyed that just your unit stats and what your equipment has and your troops have, like, kind of dictated the strategy that you wanted to use with them. Mm-hmm. In that, you have like a bunch of dudes and you can look at their firepower rating and be like, well, I'm not going to shoot these guys at a tank,
Right.
but I'll assault a tank.
I'll assault the tank. Right. I'll go swinging.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And then, the terrain on the table and all that kind of stuff really kind of dictated, how and what you wanted to do, because it was like, there was the one part where I got some of my dudes on my platoon up on a hill overlooking your dudes,
Yep.
but I couldn't move them all up there in one movement, so only a few of the guys got to fire.
Right.
And it didn't do much. And then the next turn, I got the rest of the dudes up on the hill, and I just ruined your platoon.
Yeah.
Dudes.
Well, once again, you were like, hey, these light machine gun platoons, they might do something.
Yeah. Making that realization and realizing that, not just, the units that you do counter units that they have, and you need to try and look at the board and manipulate and move your things into positions to get a good shot at their things.
At their things. That's correct.
And it created a really interesting game that I had a lot of fun with.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's most of Flames of War. The only thing I will say that is kind of a barrier to entry to get past is the army building,
Yes.
and it can be kind of like what the hell, because you're looking at this big old pack of little itty bitty 15 millimeter dudes,
Yeah.
and you're going, I have to look at the machine guns on each one of these guys and
Right.
figure out what they are and where they're going and what base they go on and how they go. And you do, but if you actually go, the cool thing about it is Battlefront Miniatures has the the Forces of Flames of War, Forces of Team Yankee websites where you can go on there, and you do have to, if you're playing US, you do have to buy the formations, but it's
The
like
formations, right.
I think I bought all the US formations and it was like $5 or
Yeah.
$6
$6 or
30 cents or something like that.
Yeah.
And that'll let you see, okay, I need to put this many dudes of this on a base and all that stuff, and how to organize your force. And it's a little bit like, wait, what the hell? Because it's not super rigid either.
Right.
There's a few things that say, well, you have to have this to include that,
True,
but they're very rare.
I was going to say, once you kind of take the headquarters and a couple of units, beyond that, my army, we could be both playing the same army and have completely different armies. It's just like Malifaux, where
Right.
you have so much selection that it could be really, really varied from person to person as to what's in their army.
Right, which can be a little intimidating, but at the same time, I found out, in building a Team Yankee force, I had got Team Yankee and kind of looked a little bit at the forces and bought a bunch of crap and went, cool, and then started looking through the force builder and clicking and doing options, and I was like, oh wow, I actually have a viable army just off of this crap I bought randomly because it looked like it was going to be cool and fun to use.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, one of the things for Team Yankee, it seems like, is everybody needs a little bit of, anti-aircraft, and everybody needs a little bit of helicopter, because that game becomes something very interesting when you have those two units.
Well, yeah, and you actually need to specifically have anti-helicopter, anti-aircraft, because your regular anti-aircraft stuff doesn't do so well against helicopters.
Helicopters, that's right.
And it's a different thing. So that's why I put those AH Cobras in.
Yeah, and the Cobra's in there. That's right.
Because America.
And I will say this is just knowing what I know about Team Yankee, just so people on the outside that have never seen the game or understand the game, is that if you're interested in air cav instead of like mechanized cavalry, air cav is only available in a couple of lists, in a couple of armies. So if you're interested in that, just look up the ones that have air cav. I think the Americans have it.
Oh,
I think
the Americans
British have
big
it.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The British have it available. Most everybody else is mechanized.
Yeah, the Americans pretty much started air cav.
Crazy people jumping down helicopters. Right.
Yeah, if you really want to see the beginning of the American air cavalry, watch the Mel Gibson movie We Were Soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good movie, and
very good movie.
It explains the battle where the military kind of went, we're going to try this crazy idea of putting these guys out of helicopters.
Right.
And for those of you who may be Vietnam War buffs, Battlefront Miniatures actually does a
NAM,
Team
yeah.
Yankee NAM supplement.
That's
where you
right.
can play with all the Vietnam era stuff.
Yeah. So, interesting.
It's really cool. I also like the fact it's cool to me that the company's from New Zealand and that they do this stuff. And I actually have a buddy of mine that's a Marine. And I went through and I was showing him the, force org charts for the, Marine mechanized rifle company, and I'm like, okay, well, this is based on the game is based on the year being right about 1985,
Right.
and the Cold War has basically become a hot war. But because everybody's scared of nuclear shit, they're actually doing a traditional ground war, and it's exploded into World War III in ground war style combat. And the cool thing is that when I actually was going over the organization of like the Marines in there, he's like, well, this isn't too far off from how we do it now. He's like, I'm not really sure how they did it in 1985.
Right,
He's
right.
like, but there's a very good chance because our organization is so much similar to this now that this is pretty close to accurate.
Right.
I'm
And
like, well, that's cool.
And that's something they stuck to all the way through. Is they're like, historically, let's make the units make sense for what they really were and how they were organized. So that's interesting that they stuck to that all the way throughout.
Yeah, it looks like they did, and I am looking forward to playing Flames of War too.
Yeah.
I think accuracy and tactics is something that a lot of miniature wargamers are actually really striving for, or looking for. All the time I'm hearing people complain about how the rules don't mesh up with the way things would work, especially when they're first getting in. I hear a lot of complaints about, like, well, why can't I have intersecting lanes of fire actually matter, or anything like that. So I would commend any game that actually does that.
And one of the things you can tell people that bring up those kind of things is you can be like, look, that's a cool idea. I want you to sit down and start coming up with rules that would allow that to add to this game. And then when they start realizing, well, okay, to make that happen, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And then even if they're like, this is a great idea, be like, cool, let's play a game like that. And then when they realize that hour and a half game of Flames of War now takes 4 hours,
Right.
because you're sitting there referencing all these super hyper realistic rules, they go, oh, okay, never mind. Now I see why they did it this way.
I know there is a severe balance to it.
Yeah.
And most often the simplicity, I find, is starting to at least win out.
Yeah.
But it is just a common thing I do hear from newer players, especially ones with a military background.
Right.
Right. And that's the thing, is it's a simulation. It's not meant to be exact. And one of the quickest ways to turn me off on a game is to throw charts at me.
You mean you didn't love 6th and 7th edition?
No.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, I put up with them because that was a game to play, and that was what most of the people I knew played. But I really hated having to have those charts open on the table.
Yeah.
So I knew what was going to hit and what wasn't and all that kind of stuff, and it was really aggravating.
I had so much to unlearn.
Right. Which, I mean, simplicity-wise, there are games, too, that, if you do want the more complex rule set, there are games out there. You just have to find them. I was looking over Drop Zone Commander.
Right.
And while that seems somewhat simple, there's also a good bit of firepower and weapon shooting charts, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, I started watching some of the
see how this
videos, and I
goes.
was like, "Ooh, gosh, a little bit complicated."
Yeah, I looked up a how to play Drop Zone Commander, and it was like, how to play Drop Zone Commander. We go through a game, and it was like an hour and a half long, and I'm like, that's a starter game?
Yeah.
Well, I may not worry too much about this one.
Right. When they pulled out the protractor and the abacus, I was starting to get nervous.
Yeah. when you have to have a weird Asian kid with a TI-86 calculator on hand to figure out your game, that's bad news.
Wait, you don't keep one of those?
Shh.
All right. Don't know what we're talking about anymore.
Yeah. We don't talk about Lee. That was racist as hell.
Oh, man. I should stop. Probably not going to. I should stop.
No. But anyway, yeah, the and that's the whole thing, is it's balancing that simplicity of rules to everything else. And it's the same thing. That's why I always talk about barrier to entry on games. Because it's like, to me, a barrier to entry of, say, Malifaux right now is because Weird is having a battle with the distributors.
Sure.
They're having a hard time getting their product to anybody.
Oh, yeah. I've been
Yeah.
dealing with that myself.
And it sucks because one of the reasons like I haven't been up at Vendetta pushing more Malifaux lately is because I'm like, why? They can't get anything.
Right.
There's almost nothing to buy, so it's like I'm gonna go up there and be like, you guys can play this really awesome game, but you're gonna have to play with my stuff because
Oh yeah, like I've been actually very diligently talking to a lot of my miniature wargamers about it and sharing with them my experiences thus far. And most of them have seemed very ambivalent, and I really wish that I could put things in their hands to show them, no, look, guys, I'm not lying to you, this is actually a really cool game. But it does also have a little bit of the barrier to entry because I am trying to explain to them like the list building, which is a little bit different than the games that they're used to. So,
not as much as you think.
well,
Because list building is actually pretty easy.
It's true,
But
but
it's
if you
making that mental
come from a
switch.
game, if you come from a background or never been exposed to miniature wargaming, and you go, oh, but you have to organize this way, that has never really been done before.
And I mean, in M2E, that was a difficult thing.
M2E.
And honestly, if you were to get a bunch of M2E product in at your store, it would get pretty confusing pretty quick because the old M2E boxes would just say like, you know, closing time, and you have a bunch of drunken Bayou Gremlin ninjas on the box, and yeah, that looks cool, and you buy it, and then you go, what the hell else do I need to put with this? Well, in M2E, you could put anything with it.
Right.
It didn't matter. You could throw whatever the hell you wanted in your crew. There were very few rules. Whereas in M3E, it's all based on keyword. And if you don't have those M3E cards, you don't know.
You don't know.
But the new M3E packaging has all of the keywords on the outside of the box. So you can say, oh, you want to play Misaki? Well, she's Last Blossom. So then you can say, here's all of my Last Blossom keyword models and boxes. You know, these are editions you can buy. And then they can look at the box and go, cool, bang, and done. And they've done that for simplicity's sake. The problem is them getting out all
Enough
the rest
product.
of the
Right.
M3E product and getting it to everybody in their hot little hands to buy.
But, you know, as you were saying, though, the barrier to entry for miniature wargaming is a little bit different. There's this whole hobby skill that you have to have. There's list building. It's a different beast, but it's really interesting. Most of the people that start in miniature wargaming stick with it for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, once it gets in your blood,
You're right.
you're doing it, and you're doing it forever.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's just because there are so many aspects of it, it keeps you interested.
That's right.
Because you're going, okay, cool, I can grab these guys, I can paint them up, and if they just sit on my shelf, that's great, I got something that looks cool. And my friends go, hey, that's really neat. You paint that?
Yeah, one day you're buying a starter set, the next thing you're scouring eBay to buy entire, unloads of somebody else, and
hey, you don't know my life.
a year later you're snorting, 3D printer dust.
Or melting down miniatures in a spoon
There you go.
Right.
stuck in
Yeah,
the bathroom.
Going to see my plastic dealer.
Yeah, that's why I can't have resin. I will freebase the shit out of resin. I'm just kidding, I don't actually do that.
Well, it was
I
interesting.
freebase cocaine. No, I don't do that either. Shit, fuck.
Great, now we're demonetized.
So,
Nobody's gonna support us now. No sponsors, no nothing.
except cocaine sponsors.
Ooh.
They have money. They sell cocaine.
Juan's cocaine, import, export.
I mean, we can get Dare to sponsor us. Don't be these guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Sort of like passive aggressive sponsoring.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, earlier we were talking about, did you ever start an army or not start an army because of the backstory? I know for sure that I've picked up miniatures that I had no interest whatsoever in playing and just picked them up and painted them. Just because I was like, no, I need to put one of those together and paint
Yeah.
it.
That's definitely true. There's a rule around my shop and my home is that you do not leave unpainted miniatures around Nate because he will paint them whether you want him to or not.
Right. And I've found myself. Oh, really?
I bet you won't.
Let me see those.
I was going to say, I've even found myself like picking up, random studio sculpts just because I was like, oh, those look cool. Like Sally, right?
Right. Totally like Sally. He's gonna be so tickled that you brought up Sally. On this podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
No, what I was thinking was like Kingdom Death, or there used to be a company, Soda Pop.
I've done some Soda Pop minis
Yeah.
before. I've also done some Kingdom Death.
Right.
I will never build another one, I say, lying to myself.
Right. But they look cool, and so you're like, man, I got to pick these up just so I can paint them. Yeah.
I did that, and I looked at Kingdom Death, and I went, this looks really cool. I want to get these guys just to paint them because aesthetic, awesome, creepy shit. And then I went, okay, well, that is a price point I am not willing to do just for hobby's sake.
You're like, I bought this box. What was I thinking?
I could have bought this box or a 1982 Honda Civic to get me to and from work. Your pick.
Weighing options now.
But yeah, but those models, they are gorgeous and they're big, and I'm not saying that Kingdom Death isn't worth every penny if you want to buy it.
Yeah, what you're paying for there is the sculpt. The sculptor is by far. Some of the stuff they're making is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and as a game, from what I understand, the game itself is very much kind of like, honestly, if you want similar gameplay, get like Gloomhaven or Blackstone Fortress or one of the living board games or whatever they call it, where you can keep
Legacy.
Legacy.
Yeah.
Board games, Pandemic, that kind of stuff. It's going to have a similar gameplay to it, and if you want that with the crazy miniatures, then it's probably worth every penny. The difference is I would never play it.
Yeah, I can't speak to those other ones, but the first Legacy Pandemic, if you're going on like a vacation, want to bring a board game to play and run through it, it was great. We had a blast, did it for Christmas, and we ran through the whole thing on a Christmas break. Like 18 games of Pandemic, and it was a blast.
I've actually been hearing a lot of positive things about the Season 2 stuff.
Yeah.
Quite a few, actually. But sadly, I can't get anyone to play it with me.
If I had more time. Anyway, because I will play just about anything if I have time. Problem is I don't have any time, so now I'm picky about what I play.
No, time is always a factor for miniature wargamers.
Well, trust me, when I had more time, I actually went out and picked up the Horus Heresy board game. Ken remembers this.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And we sat down at Ken's shop, and we were like an hour and a half in, and we still had not started the first turn.
Right.
And we just
it was
looked
like
at each other,
all set up, and I was just like, holy cow.
And we just looked at each other, we're like, I don't even want to start this, because if it's an hour and a half to set up, I don't even want to know how long this is going to go.
Right, and there was a lot of charts, and
a lot of charts.
abacuses,
and weird things, and gnomish inventions, and a drill dough. I don't know what that was there for, but it was black, it was floppy, and it went on a drill. That's weird.
The classics never get old.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they made another one, Seafall, which is a standalone. The same guy because he did Legacy Risk, and then he got with Pandemic, and then Pandemic 2, Season 2, and then he did Seafall, which was his first standalone where he built a game to be a Legacy game.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I thought it was a pretty cool game, but to me it felt like it unraveled way more slowly than Pandemic Legacy, where
Actually,
it almost felt like about halfway through the Legacy you had a full game. It really needed to unpack more of the mystery stuff early on and then do more stuff. It didn't feel like a full game early on.
I hear that same complaint about that game quite often.
Seafall?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's actually one that I carry. And Legacy games, there's only so many that do them.
Yeah. Well, when you look at Pandemic, though, that was an award-winning, great board game that they added that Legacy thing to, and there was so much going on there, and they just didn't hit the mark with the basics of Seafall.
So moving from board games, which we don't talk about, to
we do.
we do a little bit, but that was our little bit. That was as much time as I'm willing to let this podcast spend on a board game.
Yeah, we were getting you got 15 seconds, crazy eyes. We were getting that for a little bit.
But
I'm in danger.
We can move to the next closest thing that still involves miniature wargaming, which is Jeremy talking about how much he enjoyed Aeronautica Imperialis.
I did actually
Because
enjoy
we
it.
touched
Yeah,
on that.
I admit that I was
I'd
wrong.
love
It
to
was a
hear
very
him
fun
say
game.
a little more about
Yeah.
the experience.
It was interesting. I didn't have nearly the problems I did when I first tried playing Armada, where I was crashing my starships into each other. I didn't have any crashing in that regard.
Well, that's because you can't crash.
It's because you can't. So that's why I wasn't able to crash.
I'm pretty sure you would have had you been
You
able.
probably would have, yeah. But it was a lot of fun. The messing with speed and height and maneuvering. I still would like to see things more readily at a glance. The numbers on them being bigger, and just being able to see what's going on with planes without having to like get up and go over and look. Okay, what height is this guy at? What speed is he traveling at?
That is my one and only criticism of that game as well.
But I will say that it was more intuitive than I thought it was going to be. On the where I saw what was on the board and all that, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Which they do give you a suggestion in the manual and in the Rin's World campaign book of, since the models actually sit really nice on those like gimbal bases or gimbal flight stands they make, they're incredibly well done for GW flight stands, because normally I hate GW's flight stands. But if you're going up in altitude, you can actually tilt the ship
Tilt it up.
If you're going down, you're diving, you can tilt the ship down or tilt the plane down, just to kind of say, okay, I'm doing this, and you can even tilt it to the one side or the other based on how you turn, and stuff to give it that realistic look.
A little
and
more
feel.
thematic, yeah.
And but unfortunately, there's no easy way to see or quick way to kind of at a glance check the speed, other than looking at the base. And I think honestly, if we were playing that game like at in FLGS, then we could actually, be standing next to the table and you'd be looking down. You'd be able to see that a lot easier. But I think because we play mostly sitting because we're fat, lazy assholes, that we don't see it as much. But it was fun. Yeah,
You're talking about the table, right?
the table is a fat, lazy asshole. Yes. This table has not done a damn thing or gotten a job since I got it.
That's right.
Fucker.
I've never seen it walk anywhere.
Yeah, well, it needs to start.
Now, I will say that one thing that I was actually much a fan of in Aeronautica was the ability to push your ship or your plane beyond its capabilities.
Right.
To try daring things at a cost.
That's that risk management.
Yeah, we were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah, where, you can when you dive, you have to increase your speed, and if you increase your, like if there's a guy and you're too high, you're not going to be able to shoot him.
That's right.
So you have to dive down. So if you dive down, your speed increases. If you're at your max speed to complete your ace maneuver, you have no way to do it other than to dive down, let your max speed increase, and then you start rolling a breakup check. And luckily, they're pretty easy to pass, I think. But you still run a chance of having your plane essentially rip apart around you.
Rip apart.
Or stall out and fall.
Yeah. If you have to climb and your speed isn't high enough. Or even if you climb past your max altitude. If you're already at your max and that guy's, has a better max than yours and he's up higher and you got to climb up to get him.
Yeah.
Then,
I was having a lot of trouble against you with that, with my orc DACA jets.
Yep.
Like, you had a higher canopy than I did, and I was constantly having to push my planes just to even touch you. And I thought that was great.
Yep.
I also like the fact that you have so many variable stats with, just how much altitude you can gain or lose on any given turn, what your threshold, your canopy is, your speeds on top of the ranges of your weapons. It gives you so many things to calculate. And it also, moving forward, it will give Games Workshop a number of things to work with to actually create variation in the different planes rather than them just being like different shapes and pretty colors.
Right. And I like that. I like that too. I see the expandable possibilities, and I think it's definitely a game that, it's one of those where, okay, well, we met up for gameplay and we played an hour and a half or 2 hours of Malifaux or Flames of War or Team Yankee or whatever we originally set out to play, and now we're going to, we still got some time to kill, or we can still hang out for a little bit longer. Let's throw down a game of Aeronautica.
Right.
And, You know,
Because it was quick.
Yeah, that's why
Super quick.
I kept my box. I've kept everything. Rebecca and I, my wife Rebecca and I, we also do a wine tasting podcast. And so a few Sundays ago, we went down to Chateau Maitre, and we're tasting some wine. And I was like, "Hey, do you guys care if we grab one of those tables in that big open room that nobody's using and play a game?" And they're like, "No, not at all. You guys can do that." And man, we set out that the whole Aeronautica Imperialis, and I got the the actual the cardboard tile mat,
Right,
not
yeah.
the one that comes in the starter box, but I got the expanded one, and it's bigger, and it makes the game a lot more fun too.
Yeah.
And man, we set that thing out on that table, and we started playing, and I taught her how to play, and she was playing with me, and she was initially somewhat frustrated by some of the movement and stuff like that, but in the end, she seemed to be having a much better time with it and grasping it. And her synopsis at the end, which instead of normally being, "I don't really like that game," was, "I'd have to play that game again."
Right. That's good.
So yeah,
That's like a resounding success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she loves Armada.
Yeah.
I can get her to play. I mean, if she's in the mood to play a game, I can be like, "Cool, let's play Armada," and she will be like, "All right, I'm on it." She loves that game, but most of the rest that she's played, she's not super big into. She liked Kill Team. She actually asked for a second game of Kill Team, and it's rare that she will admit she likes something, and it's rare that she will ask for a second game, and all that. So she, but yeah, those were the two games that I think that she's liked the most, was Armada and Kill Team, and then I got a Well and Willing to try it again with the Aeronautica Imperialis. So.
Right.
It definitely has my vote. I kind of actually want to see if I can scour the internets for the old Forge World Aeronautica Imperialis books of the previous edition of the game, because it is apparently played very similarly, but instead of hexes, you actually measure things out.
Right. It was all inches, yeah.
And the only reason I never played that game back in the day, because I really wanted to, was that barrier to entry was you have to order these models from Forge World. They were pretty expensive for what you got because Forge World, and I was going to have to order it and wait forever, and there was no core set, and there was no way to get two factions out to play with your buddy easily without spending a literal metric shit ton of dollars.
So you mentioned like the rulers, and that's actually something that I've been considering lately. Is this may be an unpopular opinion, but I have actually enjoyed the use of the hexes over the rulers. Having now been to many tournaments where people, are a little generous with their measurements, I feel it keeps people in a less ambiguous movement phase.
Right, I agree with you, and that's why I kind of want to try it both ways to see which way. But it's like I enjoy playing Dust because I don't have to
Right.
think about
have to think
movement.
about it. Yeah.
Like, I know I can move 3 squares. I know I can move however many hexes in Aeronautica Imperialis. And I do like it for that. And I think it makes the game go a lot faster.
Oh, definitely.
And so I enjoy it for that aspect. But if I want to sit down and play, like, let's play an entire, like, squadron on squadron battle that's going to be a battle royale kind of thing, I almost want to have the measuring tape inches rules to kind of get more like, I think at that point it would become kind of a mix of like a Battlefleet Gothic or Armada type game, but with your rulers instead of with just hexes. So
Right.
that's kind of my take on it. Is that I think it'd be fun and usable at times, but not the way I would prefer to play. Mm-hmm. Because I'm the same as you. I like it for some reasons, but and then getting into that too, I thought of like Malifaux and some of the other games, especially skirmish games. I really like the measuring widgets that they make.
The widgets, I think, make it
Really quick.
faster and a little bit more honest.
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
because you can set it at the front of the base, and you can just you
Yeah.
can turn it on, twist it, and turn it on a corner. 1,
That's
2,
it.
3, 4, 5. Boom, there you go.
Yeah.
And that's where your guy's going to be.
Yeah.
And then, it consistently brings that. Okay, that was this many inches, and that's where my model's going to be, and that's how I can move. And it even lets you, because you can turn it around corners and do things like that, so you don't have to do weird things, measuring tape or with fudging things or knocking things around.
Yeah, it's
Or
funny.
your hand shaking whenever you're holding a tape measure.
Right.
It's interesting. Thinking back, everybody hated those red sticks that were in GW boxes, but I used to cut them into 6-inch or 8-inch lengths
I remember
all
that.
the time because you could bend it. You could just use the 6-inch, and then therefore you measured with the little measuring device instead of a tape measure. It was interesting.
Yeah, I remember playing with those a lot
Yeah.
at your shop, and then whenever you'd have some that you hadn't cut down, they would run around and whip each other with them.
No, that never happened.
That was never a thing.
I've never done that.
It's interesting though. You know why they stopped doing that? Why they stopped carrying those sticks?
Yeah, I don't know.
Venner actually told me, if I remember correctly. I think he was the one who told me. I'm not sure, but they found out that people were using them at tournaments and they were allowing them until they found out that people were heating them up in ovens and lengthening them.
That's funny.
Yeah, they would get it just hot enough.
They added an inch or a half inch or
Yeah,
whatever. That's
to
crazy.
just pull them a little bit longer so they could get that extra half inch of movement. Which honestly, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, "Wow, that's a cool idea," you're a fucking douche.
It amazes me the lengths that people will go to. I made a joke at one tournament, and I had joked about just printing up a new rule book or like something with some tweaks in it, and somebody looked at me and said, "Oh no, like we found a guy doing that," and I'm like, "Are you serious right now?" Somebody went through the time and effort to scour the rule book and write in the things that they want to and have one made for them to their specifications.
So it would look like the real,
Yeah.
honest to God rule book.
Yeah.
Rule book. Wow.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you go to that length
Wow.
to cheat at playing toy soldiers, not only do I want nothing to do with you, but you may want to totally reevaluate every life decision you've ever made. Big time. Mm-hmm. Because wow, that's I thought the red sticks in the oven, because I was like, I would have never thought of that, because why would I, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Why would
need-
that even come up?
I don't need that extra half inch that much. Well, not on a red stick anyway.
Nobody get any ideas.
Maybe on a purple one.
Yeah, but I would have never thought of it, because I would never go to that length to try and win, because I just don't care enough. Like, yeah, I want to win, but if I win, I want to win the way I'm supposed to win.
Yeah.
Well, so many people.
Worse to be playing Magic where cheating's par for the course of those tournaments.
Oh yeah, somebody tried to tell me that once, and I nearly gave him 5 across the eyes. But for a lot of games, people, I know we're getting seriously off topic here, but a lot of people make the victory too much the purpose of the game.
Right.
And it's really not. If you are like tweaking that hard to win at something, that is another time when you need to seriously reevaluate your life decisions and why you're in gaming in general.
Or just get a job and get out of your mom's basement.
Well, I think
Fucking
it goes
neckbeard.
back to what we were talking about before, and all of us, everybody listening to this podcast, the people around this table, if you run a store, if you're just somebody that's in a hobby community, focus on the culture of the hobby.
Right.
If you focus on the culture and the community, this will be something way better for your life than loading a few dice to roll your way.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Oh, it's like I've not even about loading them. I just remember seeing an article about finding the balance to your dice, because you didn't load the dice, but you buy a whole bunch of bulk dice, and then you make salt water and you float them in there and check their balance. So you just find ones that are balanced the way you want them, because they're not all equally balanced. You might have ones that roll higher, some that roll lower.
Great, Jeremy. You just
Yeah.
created another douche in the community.
Oh, so,
yeah, somebody.
oh, so you all bring up examples. I bring one, and I'm the asshole. I see how it is.
Well, I'm glad that you figured it out.
that is how it works. And
Well, I'm the one who went too far.
There's some guy right now with his headphones on, listening to the podcast. He's like,
Going, I got to get some salt water.
all right, how do we make salt water?
We're like, all right, guys, keep the ideas coming.
I love these guys. They just really speak to me.
You know, if you take a car battery and hook it up directly to your nipples, you will win every tournament ever.
That's science.
You know, a
That's
shaman
improved.
on top of a mountain told me that once, and it has never failed me.
Right. Telling you, car battery to nipples.
Tell your friends.
It's the new holistic medicine.
It'll also improve your marriage.
Whoa.
You're assuming any of these people are married.
So will a dildo, but whatever.
Drill dough. Jeez.
The Vonda Schnechts.
Or just go all out and completely convert your basement into a German dungeon.
Hey, again, I feel very targeted right now.
I mean, look, there's a secret wall down there. You push on the right center block and opens up.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah, don't go down there. Anyway, but moving on, since we started talking about hobby stuff, I am really super excited because November 9th and 10th, I will be taking the CK Studios Airbrushing 101 class, and have somehow convinced both Kat and Caleb of the class and of CK Studios fame, I guess, fame. I don't know if they're really famous or not, but anyway, they seem like cool people. They're actually both going to be staying with me.
Oh,
I've basically said, hey, I'll house you, because why not? Save
Right.
you a hotel thing and all that stuff. And I helped talk with them and whatnot to try and set up and, figure out where they could do their class, where they'd be willing to, and how to do it. So we're going to be doing that, and it's going to be a fun class. I'm going to have a lot to talk about once I'm done with that. And, it's all about, you basically, their 101 class is all about the basics of using your airbrush, mixing paints. A lot of it, I think, is stuff I kind of already know, but I think I'm going to pick up some new techniques of how to do the things I already know to do in a much cleaner, better fashion than that. And then, of course, I'm going to be spreading that love around to everybody I know, because that's the way it works.
Oh, yeah.
He's not talking about airbrushing anymore. Don't let him fool you.
No, that's...
Oh, he was fooling
He
no
means
one.
something completely else when he starts talking about spreading love.
it involves a drill dough. They'll be the sponsor of our next show. Anyway, but yeah, they're, like I said, they're really awesome people. They go around the country and they do these classes. I've been trying to nail down Caleb for an interview and have him on the show as an interview spot, and have yet to be able to successfully do that. Our schedules just have not lined up yet. And I know they're super busy because, like I said, they travel all over the nation and to the UK to teach these classes. And they teach several. And they actually have Sam Lentz and Vincent Ventrullo and Justin Kiefer on their staff as well, who are all really good painters and award winners and things like that. And they teach the more advanced classes, and some of their stuff, like I think one of the Vincent Ventrullo classes and stuff like that is all like you're painting a bust and it's all brushwork. They don't just do airbrushing.
right.
And they do a lot for spreading the hobby around, being super hobby positive. If you ever get a chance,
Yeah.
look them up. They're good stuff. And I know, moving on from that, I know that Ken mentioned that he was doing a lot of terrain,
Yeah.
which is things I hate to do.
Yeah, I'm working on a whole table of 15 millimeter terrain currently. And I enjoy it. I try to find items that are just like things in your, I know this is going to sound completely dorky, but things that are at your local hobby store, things that are at your local hardware store or in your yard. I do a lot of found items. One of the things I'm using right now, we were mentioning, Forge World just a minute ago. I'm taking the wedge that comes on every Forge World sprue of all the Marines and guardsmen and stuff. I'm taking that wedge and I'm making jersey barriers out of them.
I've done the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's a
They're
good thing to
perfect
do.
size and
Yeah,
shape for that. So
for 15 millimeter, it's perfect, and I love it. Just to kind of reuse as much stuff as you can, and so it's interesting. You can make. I tend to make a table's worth of terrain at a time when I'm doing it. And the reason why I do that is because then you've got a whole table, and the next time you can do another whole table. Then you can start mixing and matching and stuff like that. But what that does for you is really allows you to kind of build tables on a theme and really kind of have some fun with the different terrain sets you can build for your games. Just so you can be on different planets, different battlefields, whatever, you know.
The closest I've gotten to being inspired to make terrain lately is I was thinking about, playing Flames of War, how I have no 15mm terrain, and anything that you can just buy out of a box for it is generally kind of expensive for what you get, in my opinion. And so I was like, So I started looking into a hot wire cutter and some styrofoam stuff to make some hills and, just that kind of terrain for.
They actually do work really well. Though you do want to wear a mask because she will destroy your lungs.
Yeah. There's
They're
also
pretty much gone.
saw blades. There's tabletop cutters that you can do also without having to hot wire them and breathe in bad vapors.
I breathe in bad vapors all the time.
All the time.
Mostly because Jeremy has this weird thing he puts on his butt. I just suck the farts right out.
The biggest thing that I can say as a hobby tip for making terrain, and this is a tip that you can use for no matter if you're making 28, 15mm, or whatever. If you're building terrain for your tables, always base it. And by basing it, I mean just like your miniature has a base, put a base on your terrain. I tend to use two different items for basing my terrain. One is masonite, which is just a thin piece of pressed wood material, or MDF, but really thin. I use the 3/16 typically, unless it's a big piece, and then I'll go up in thickness a little bit. Or plasticard. You can get plasticard just about any hobby store or even hardware stores carry it. But here's a tip that I tend to use a lot is if you're looking for plasticard, you need plasticard, go to your local sign shop and just ask them if they have scrap. A lot of times they have scrap, plasticard, and PVC sheets that they've used for other things. And they have the 8" by 8", 12" by 12" squares that they can't do anything with. And they will freely give you that stuff because they're just chunking it.
I actually had a friend of mine who was a really big miniature wargamer. In fact, is the one that inspired me as a painter to be the best I could be. It's my friend Lance, and he had himself a sign shop. And the stuff that he would do with his scrap was actually fairly amazing.
Yeah.
It's the simplest things, and my mind just never connected to the dots till he's like, "Hey, Nate, check out this cool thing I figured out."
Right.
He would even cut down, the signs, they're pressed together and they've got that corrugation in the center of them.
Corrugation, yeah.
He would take this particular cutter and slice thin strips of them, and the way that they would come apart would look just like joists or rebar.
Right.
He gave me like a baggie full of them, and I went through them in no time.
I can tell you that my buddy Jason Baker gave me a bunch of like a bag of terrain, and that was some of the stuff we were using when we played Flames of War.
Right.
And I don't know if you noticed that one little hut that was kind of on the side of the table.
Yeah.
Even though it was 28mm terrain, we were just like, screw it, it'll be stuff on the table. And it worked because it was mostly all hills and trees and things. It wasn't anything major, but there was like a house that would have been like the house of a giant had it been real. But I was like, we'll just pretend it's a big building. And then there was a hut thing, like a barn almost, would have been the size of it in 15mm. But, in 28mm, it's like almost like a shed. And he made this thing out of old cereal boxes and popsicle sticks.
Right.
And it looks like a shed. I mean, it looks great.
Looks right. That idea of using found items, things in your yard, rocks, pieces of bark, you'd be surprised what you could do with just a few found local items.
I made Connex boxes out of old discarded HeroClix boxes, of which we had 1 million, and the bottom liner of pizza boxes.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people, I follow several different terrain groups on social media, and a lot of people are saying, hey, I'm going to do something with this packing foam. And I'm always amazed what they can make out of just the packing foam that they're normally getting, and doing something really cool with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. Some of the diorama builders and stuff that I've seen that I'll see, they'll be like, yeah, this was made out of this and that, this and that. There's a guy in Australia who has become pretty well known among one of the groups that I pay attention to. His name is Jeremy Wood, and he does these dioramas. I mean, it looks like these just destroyed, habitats and stuff, and they're nothing. It's just crap he's got laying around the house.
Right.
That's what he uses.
Right.
He doesn't use anything crazy, and builds these amazing. I mean, if you get a chance, look his stuff up because.
Yeah.
I think he got second place overall in like Armies on Parade and
Armies
stuff like
on
that.
Parade, yeah, I think so.
He does pretty good, and he doesn't actually play. He just does the hobby.
Just does the hobby, yeah.
Yep.
So I actually was doing up. I do have my love of salamanders, so I paint a lot of lava stuff, and I have been recently collecting bark. You can boil it and get like any of the mites or anything out of it, and it does make it too soft really to work with overall until you get it primed up and painted and seal the shit out of it. But I've had people oohing and awing over them like, dude, like where did you buy that from? And I'm like, the tree outside.
You can also heat that in an oven to kill the mites. And
Yeah.
then you don't have to boil it and soften it.
That's true.
There's also, you can actually, if you get lice spray from Walmart, it's not very expensive. It's a lice treatment stuff. It's a pump spray. You can also hose it down with that and give it several treatments over the course of a few days, and then you won't have mites in it.
Oh, interesting.
The reason I know that is because me and my buddy Repo were big into reptiles for a while.
Yep.
And that's how you get rid of mites on reptiles, and it will kill, the stuff. If you put, like they talk about, if you want to get driftwood for
But you
your
put them in
snake-
the oven?
No, not the snake, but if you get driftwood for their cages,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they actually suggest you heat it in the oven over time, and the only thing you have to worry about is that sometimes if it's in the wrong part of the cycle, the eggs can actually survive. Unless you're heating it to the point where it bursts into flame, but
Right.
but
But yeah, it's a low temperature,
Yeah.
longer period, just like you're dehydrating something.
yeah, and that was a much better method than boiling,
Yeah.
because it didn't ruin the wood, and it also killed most everything in it, and you got what you needed. And then it was like, well, if you do have mites, the easiest way to take care of them was to get that lice spray, because it will kill the mites just like the lice, because
Yeah,
lice are
that's
basically
interesting.
mites. They're just human mites that live in your hair.
Speaking of which, when you said boiling, the first time somebody said, "Oh, you got some bent piece of Forge World, you just boil it," and I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Man, you don't even have to boil that stuff.
No,
Just a hairdryer a lot of times. will do
reasonably
it.
hot water.
Yeah, reasonably hot water.
I've used just the tap. I just hit the hot, wait
Yeah.
till it's as hot as it can possibly get. I've held it under there for a minute, if even that.
Right.
45 seconds, and then just been able to bend it right back to shape.
Yeah, any resin pieces like that, you can typically bend right back into shape a little bit.
Unless
warm
they're
water.
like solid
Yeah.
pieces.
If it's a big, half-inch thick piece or something.
I've had that on some sonic guns on an Eldar Titan. To this day, they are not straight.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you had put down in the notes also about the Raven Guard
Painting
and
black.
painting black. Yeah, I've done that so many times with the Raven Guard army. I've probably painted, like I said, 4 or 5 in my hobby career, and it's tough. You can kind of go the blue route, with like this, where you go black out to blue. You can also do some grays.
Purple also works.
Purple works pretty well. It's interesting though, especially with some of the techniques that are out there right now. That it's easier now, I think, than it was in the past because of the way the techniques of painting miniatures have been. But what are some of the other techniques that you guys have done to paint black?
Well, mine, what I've done with mine, and it's been kind of a process because I've been refining it, and I've got it down, and I've got a couple different other techniques I want to try. But I did a entire 2 units, 10 of the infiltrators
Yes.
in black, and for my custom chapter, and I did literally a black primer, and then I took, a gray ink and kind of just, did over top with the airbrush, just, to give it the gray highlight, and then took white and did, a much smaller highlight over top of that.
Right.
And the white, if you don't sit there and hold it until it becomes stark white, lets the gray shine through and it doesn't become stark white and it still stays. And then I took that and just kind of, I did a Army Painter dark tone wash just all over. And that got everything pretty dark. And then I kind of went back with some, with a little bit of black to kind of do that. And then I used some grays to do the panel lining, which I really, really hate doing.
Are you doing that all with airbrush, or are you doing some brush?
It's brush and airbrush. A lot of it is airbrush, but then like the actual panel lining and doing all the little edge highlighting or whatever they call it, doing that I'm doing with that brush, and I really, really hate that stuff. The easiest way I found to kind of do it is to actually, depending on the angle that you can get at, depends on kind of how it works, but get some gray on there and actually, instead of pointing your brush, flat your brush.
Yeah.
And then almost like a dry brush, but you have the paint is wet. You just don't have a lot on there.
Yeah.
And you just kind of angle it where it's just hitting that top edge. You're kind of almost going perpendicular to whatever edge you're wanting. And that works really good for raised edges. Now, if you're doing like little edges in the armor,
right,
you gotta have that.
If you're doing the Space Marine, you gotta just do really, really fine brush to get to where you want it to be. And so, were you batch painting like that, or were you doing each individual one?
I was batch painting.
Okay.
And yeah, and then what I did finally is, after I did that, they were still a little gray, and I wasn't entirely happy with the fact that they were still a little more gray than black. So I actually went over them all with a watered down mixture of the contrast Black Templar.
Oh, okay.
And it made them nice and good and black.
So I was going to say the contrast paint at the end really helped you kind of bring it all back in.
And of course, I did water that down a lot, because if you don't, the Black Templar is pretty strong, and it'll cover a lot of your highlights, almost too much so, if you try to go at it without watering it down, or I actually use, because you're technically not supposed to use water with the contrast paints to water them down, but
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, I used a little bit of airbrush thinner to thin it down.
To do it, or retarder. You could use the
flow improver.
That kind of thing.
One or the other will work really good, and it'll thin it out, and then you can put it on, and it's a much thinner coat. It was actually the same thing I did to paint the Jackdaw miniatures, because I did the Night Haunt glow, or whatever that one paint was, that green, to give them the ghostly look. I primed them white, gave them the green, and then wherever their prison fatigues were, I took the orange from the contrast paints and just thinned it way down, and just did the orange over it, and it gave those areas an orange glow, but still let some of that green shine through.
I was gonna say I was a couple of other times that I've seen people do black successfully is they actually painted it black and then really highlighted with maybe 3 colors of gray, out to where it was really highlighted, with like these 3 steps, and it looks pretty bright. And then they go back with a contrast paint, an ink, a wash, to bring it back to black.
I've actually seen it done in a few unique ways lately, since this is something that has always given me fits, because there are just so many ways to do it. And of course, that's more opportunities than fits, really. But depending on the quality of the black that you're trying to get, whether it be armor, whether it be something organic, you have so many options. And I was looking at this one step-by-step process by a painter at the time I had never heard of. Don't ask me a name, because I'm way too tired for that. But she was actually painting up to the blue or the purple gradients. But she would do it on a 5-step process, and every 4th color was a major break in the color. And it was not it was not the blue or the purple. She actually used a lot of skin tones
Yes.
to give
I've
it.
seen that, yeah.
Yeah, and I was enamored with how that looked.
It gives it a very different look.
Oh yeah,
Completely.
and it's something that you notice when you're at the table looking at the minis.
That's right.
And that I feel is something very important as a painter, is being able to see it from a distance. And black is the worst when it comes to being able to notice any details at a distance.
Yeah.
Right, and it's one of those things that you'd think it'd be easy, but it's not. It's and I mean, I guess it is easy in some ways, because you could just technically prime them black, dry brush a little bit of gray, and call it done, and then pick out your details. And you could call it done, put it on a tabletop, and nobody's going to care too much.
Yeah, you could. I just despise dry brushing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of it. To me, it always makes your miniatures look dusty.
True.
Which is why even if I do dry brush things, which usually if I dry brush, it's only like, strong textured furs and chainmail and
I will say
metallics.
this too, is I have seen some people just take the time to do that top coat and not matte, and actually do a semi-gloss or an eggshell on that top coat, and that makes a difference for black.
I can say, having painted several of the assassin models or models that are technically wearing like body gloves, one of the things that I did is I took, at the time I was using Ard Coat because I had not branched out to non-Games Workshop paints. But I made the body glove itself that very shiny
Super
look.
gloss.
To give it that almost rubber-like aesthetic.
Yeah, I actually thought about going back and giving a spray of a satin varnish
A satin
over
or
the
semi-gloss
infiltrators.
over it instead of the flat, and sometimes that really brings out the black a little bit better.
Well, what you can do is actually break up your blacks and have some of
Yeah.
them matte and then some of them the gloss on the model, and it
Right.
really gives that distinction.
Yeah, and that was a thought I had too, and so I think my process is going to be, down to the prime black, do a very small amount of kind of the zenithal shading,
Right.
and then once I'm done
3-4
with that,
steps of shading,
Right.
and then come back.
and then once I'm done with that, I'll do like a matte varnish, and then just to make it easy, and because if you use inks in an airbrush and then you're going to put contrast paint on it afterward, you have to varnish it.
You have to varnish in between.
Otherwise, that contrast paint will take the ink right off.
Yeah, it will.
And so I matte varnish it. Then I'm gonna run it over with the Black Templar contrast paint. Then I'm gonna go paint my metallics and pick out my details and skin tones if there are any and things like that. And then from that point, paint the shoulder guards and bits like that and do all that stuff. And then once I'm done, go back and do a little bit of edge highlighting here and
Edge
there,
highlighting.
and then satin varnish it. And I think that's how I'm gonna do all the intercessors and the rest of the black that's in that army.
And if you're painting 40K, especially if you're doing Marines, you're kind of used to having a matte varnish things and then go back and make jewels or glass pieces have that sheen to them with hard goat or something like that. So working back into a miniature that way, it's something that we've all done before, so it's practical. It could be useful.
A tool that I'm actually using quite a bit more these days is translucent paints as well to create the staining. And I'm noting now that they're coming out with so many more varieties than they used to.
I really enjoy, one of the things I really enjoy about the and I've seen a few painters that are bigger time painters, and some of the hobby groups I'm in have some critical reviews, but for the most part I think everybody likes them. The Monument Hobbies Creature Caster Pro Acrylic paints.
Yeah,
I've not had a chance to try those.
I love them because they are literally one step from a glaze to a paint, but they're opaque enough that you can cover things with one coat if you need to, or two thin coats, whatever you want to do. But I also really enjoy them because they dry very matte, and so then it's like, okay, you get this matte finish on your model automatically just with the paints. And then when you matte varnish that over top, you get, you're not having to cut out any gloss or semi-gloss that's already in the paint.
Right.
It just stays matte as hell,
Yeah.
which I normally like. But, with those, and they're really good paints. They flow really nice. When you thin them down, they still, one of the problems I always had with some of the paints was I would thin it to do more of a glazing type technique, and it would just run into the recesses. It'd almost be like I was thinning it too much, and I couldn't find that balance between not thin enough and thinned way too much. And to kind of do a glaze and what I wanted to do to keep it where I wanted it. And those, I find it's really easy to get them the right consistency.
I was going to say the game changer for me was Secret Weapon washes. They really put some technology into how those washes work on the surface of the model. And I tend to like those when I'm doing that kind of work, but I've played with that company's paints also. And to me, it's night and day, like you said, from trying to make it yourself to using a company that's like, no, let's think through how this is going to work on the model surface. So.
The Secret Weapon stuff is also very nice. I was impressed the first time I came across them with their color variations and the fact that you don't often get a lot of light colored washes.
Right.
So that was a very pleasant thing for me. I've also done the scale 70. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The scale 75 stuff.
Yes.
Is pretty phenomenal. Though I am running into the problem often that whenever, even if I'm thinning it, it does tend to clog up your airbrush just a bit more. But their fantasy line has a wonderful amount of vibrancy. And they also do produce quite a few of those translucent paints.
Yeah, I've heard the scale 75 is kind of like neck and neck with the Pro Acryl, depending on which level you stay at, and pretty much people like one the other. It's kind of like the top three paints is kind of the Pro Acryl, scale 75, and P3 paints are like what everybody's like. These are the top, in some order or another, depending on their preference. Me personally, I really like the Army Painter washes, and they released a set with the different colors in them, where you have the blue, the green, the red. You've got your soft,
I got that one.
Yeah, you got your soft tone, your hard tone, and your dark tone, and then a flesh wash, and all that. And I really enjoy. I like the way those washes do. There's not a lot of coffee staining with them. And then if you give it a satin or gloss varnish, it's like almost just in the recesses.
Right.
And when they dry very uniformly on the model instead of, like I said, you kind of have to really glob it on or work at it to get a coffee stain on a model with their washes. And I enjoy that about it, because one of the things I like GW washes for, like pin washing or getting specific spots, because when they dry, they do tend to stay just as dark as they were, or just as, kind of brownish rustic as they were. Whereas I think a lot of other washes, when they dry, they're kind of more translucent, less opaque. And the GW washes are more opaque, less translucent.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you try to do an all-over wash with GW washes,
it will muddy that whole figure.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost have to repaint.
Like you
that
said,
whole
it's
model.
almost like you're using them in a spot situation anyway.
Unless you really just want to jack that model up.
Yeah.
I've done that on occasion.
And I think it's just, all of that just leads me to that. Another point is, you're going to have to play around with some different paints, some different washes, play with doing airbrush. Like, I've found out that I don't like working with the airbrush. Now, if I have to paint something that's really big, of course I'm going to pull the airbrush out, but I tend not to use it that much. And it's just because it doesn't lend itself to the way I paint. But I probably have painted with 15 different paint companies, and I've just found the ones that I like the best. I tend to like Vallejo's a little bit better than some of the others, the game colors and
I also
stuff.
like Vallejo as well.
Yeah.
Vallejo's really good.
Yeah, I really like it.
Which Derek has corrected me numerous times.
Oh.
It's Vallejo.
Yeah.
Is actually it's a
he's
Spanish company.
Yeah, it's a Spanish company.
2
That's
L's
right.
is a Y and a J is a H. So it's Vallejo.
I don't think that's going to alter how I say it.
Should. Because we like to do things right around here.
The only other thing I was going to say about the secret weapons was I just can't be around cotton candy because I want to drink it every time I see it.
That's
Dude, it
true.
does look delicious.
Like, I ordered that one the very first time I had access to secret weapon
Right,
stuff. I'm
right.
like, a pink wash? I got to do it just to see it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, all in all, it is really, I mean, that is what makes the hobby aspect of miniature wargaming so much fun, is it is like, sit down and fuck with it.
Yeah.
You know? And
Take your time. Play with different ones. Play with different techniques.
Right. And it's like, people, well, what if I ruin my model? Okay, well, first off, you have to work to ruin one of these models.
Yeah.
I mean, you actually have to work at it. You either A, have to put some weird chemical that melts it, B, leave it in a way too hot car or put it in the oven or microwave or something.
Right.
C, literally just grind it up in a food processor to ruin a model.
Right. And don't paint with really thick paint.
Yeah. But even then, you haven't ruined the model. Because guess
you
what?
have not ruined a model.
You don't like the way it looks. It's too thick. It looks like melted crayon. You have a fingerprint in the paint on the greave of your
I've done
Space
that
Marine.
before. Yeah.
Space Marine.
We all have.
Guess what? Now you get to learn another aspect of hobbying. Strip that sumbitch.
Yeah.
And
Stripping's not just for ladies with poles. That's right.
but that's the best kind. Strippers. Anyway.
Now, if you could get strippers to strip your models.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Yeah. Now we're like sharing a brain moment here.
That's oddly nerdly erotic.
I know.
I'm weirded out by this.
All right.
Because all I'm thinking
Next
about is
business venture.
My poor brain has just gone to some sad naked lady with a toothbrush working a model. Yeah.
And she's got the little spatters of acrylic paint.
Wait, no. Say that same thing.
And then at one
but
point she
slower
looks up and
deeper.
goes, "It's a living."
Yeah. Or like, the lady sitting there wearing nothing but a bikini, 1970s car wash style. She's got the simple green and she's scrubbing it and she dries it off in her cleavage and then goes back to scrubbing.
I'm glad this
Thought
table's
about this.
I'm
way
glad
too
this
much.
table's here right now.
Yeah.
It did some work.
Yeah.
Finally.
I mean, I didn't say she wasn't crying while she did it because
What?
it's sad.
You're not helping.
But I assumed the crying.
Yeah, my imagination works really fast, by the way. I just wanted you to know that. Anyway.
I'm just saying, next business venture.
Yeah. So now that we're going to start bitches in bikinis stripping models and have a lot of weird cross-pollination with some strange individuals in that business, I think that's...
I just can't wait to read the hate mail.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I wish I got hate mail. That'd be amazing. But all 60 people apparently like us. I think there's we usually get 60, 70 downloads an episode, I think. But speaking of that, all you guys out there, I think that's pretty much about it for this episode. Because we can't get any worse than a stripper stripping your models.
Challenge
Oh,
accepted.
no.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens in episode 7 of the BD and SM podcast.
We're going to make sure there's never sponsors.
I am bringing my drill dough, and we are snorting cocaine off of it.
Wow. This just got fun. I'm excited to do next episode. You thought that was going to be a deterrent, didn't you?
Oh, no. But we had alluded to it. It was in the subtext before.
Somebody posted a Facebook article about something, and it was about the animatronic robotic sex dolls that were
choking someone to death.
Yeah,
or
choking
something?
someone to death. And he posted. I think it was actually Venner. I think he posted that, and I was like, and I just saw the headline and looked at it and was like, this is nowhere near the deterrent it should be. What a way to go out. I would do it. Anyway. But with that being said, I think we're going to call the show a done deal for now. And we've talked about lots of games and gaming things and hobbies, and I think that's I feel pretty satisfied.
Yep. Yes. Thank you for listening to us prattle on for another couple of hours.
That was some good prattling.
Yeah. And all of you out there in podcast land, feel free to join our Facebook group. Again, it is BD and SM Drunkards, because if you're playing beer dice and sick minis, you're probably drunk. And if not, you should be. Join our group. Feel free to give us feedback on the episodes. Leave us reviews on iTunes or Spotify or Podbean or whatever podcast aggregator you like to use. If you do, I'll start reading some of them on air.
Oh, and the hate mail.
Now I'm going to write my own hate mail.
Yeah. And if you send me
that's
hate,
next level.
That's so meta.
and if you send me hate mail, I will definitely read that, and you will get some really hilarious responses. Because seriously, or if you leave your hate mail and your address, I will probably send you a drill dough or a bag of dicks. It's one or the other. Just enjoy.
A bag of dildos.
A bag of gummy dildos.
I'm actually seeing the
hilarious.
miniature right now. Just the dildo miniature or the bag of dicks miniature substituted for something.
Oh, it's not miniature.
Okay. We're talking about the real deal. Okay.
Yeah. Nope. It has the fist attachment too. Anyway.
It always gets weird at the end.
It's the topic that
Always
just
gets
keeps on
weird at
giving.
the end.
It does because it's late and we're all tired. Anyway, yeah. So leave some shit. Tell us some stuff. If not, then just post your hobby experiences. Post the projects you're working on. We go play games with a buddy. Take pics of it. Post it. We love to see that from our people.
The
We
game.
want to see what you're doing. The game. Yeah.
The game.
Yeah. Not what you do with your buddy after the game. That's between y'all, and there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, I mean, say
it-
what they want to
No,
say.
no. If a dude wants to lay it down on a bearskin rug by a fire and hold up his army, I'm not going to judge. No, I will. I will very hard.
I mean, just be.
But
under-
it will be on a 10-point system.
I may be judge fapping, but
just make sure it is on, tasteful within the Facebook guidelines of the rules. So at least wear a Speedo. If nothing more. God, nothing more. Anyway. Anyway, now that we went
Way
again,
too far.
weird as shit. Feel free to, post your stuff, post things about your games, whatever you want to do. I think we've got about 4 or 5 regular posters out of our, 100-something members on that group. And y'all need to, get up with the homework and actually, post some shit. Quit being slack asses.
bitch.